Hello and welcome to Guilty Gear Strive. I have waited so long to say that. The wait is over. We are finally here, and I cannot be more excited. If you're brand new to all this and this is your first fighting game, don't worry, you've come to the right place. Or if this is simply the next challenge, I am glad to have you here as well. I'm honored to show everybody through the front door. Let's get started. Building up to this game's release, a lot of people discussed what true Guilty Gear is, what it's supposed to be, kind of with the retrospective attitude, considering this franchise is very, very rich history. And after covering all things Guilty Gear myself and seeing all these different perspectives for the last 5 months, I honestly can say no one knows what to expect from a Guilty Gear game, at least on launch. But I can confidently say I do know what not to expect. I don't expect comeback mechanics. I don't expect characters to follow these universal standards. You definitely should not expect universal mechanics to solve your problems. You're going to get none of that here. What has been a constant though in each Guilty Gear game are characters with a ton of identity, each with their very unique flow, unlike anyone else on the cast, specific to them, that allows you to express yourself and move through the game. And speaking of movement, let me show you using the movement, just the base movement, what I'm getting at here. So, like most fighters, you hold back to block any strike that's not a low, and down back to block any strike that's not an overhead. And like most fighters, you walk with forward and dash by pressing forward twice. Some characters can even turn this dash into a run if you hold the dash input. And while we're talking about running and dashing, let's go ahead and open up our button settings. Make sure we have our dash macro ready to go because we're going to need it later for some more complicated inputs. Lastly, if we press up, we'll be able to jump, and if we hold up and press to the left, we'll jump to the left, jump to the right, and you may have already guessed it, this is an anime fighter. We do get access to double jumps. We get access to air dashes in either direction, right? Pretty cool. But before we get too hung up on all the air movement, let's take a look at Soul's run animation a few more times. We should begin to see, even after Soul stops running, he maintained his momentum, meaning we can extend the range of our moves, increasing our option set in the mid-range. This even applies to our jumps, giving us several different trajectories, even in the air. On top of that, we can even use some of our special moves to open up our movement options too, taking things to a whole new level. But let's take a look at Kai's movement options. His run animation is just built different. He accelerates and reaches a whole different top speed from Soul, meaning if I've been playing a bunch of games on Soul and I play Kai, he can literally make me feel like a fish out of water. They're just different on a fundamental level. And this is just talking about movement alone, right? How they just navigate left and right going across the screen. It gets even more nutty. Let's take a look at how attacks work in this game and see how deep this goes. So, in Strive, every character has 5 attack buttons. Punch, kick, slash, heavy slash, and dust. Each with their own crouch and jump variants, but more importantly, each with an intended function in mind. Starting from the weakest in terms of button strength, we have our punches. These are our fastest buttons, but they don't have so much range. They're typically reserved as our get off me button or to establish our space in a scramble situation. And even when we get hit up close, we aren't really able to Gatling or chain into our stronger buttons for a good return on damage. But at the very least, we're able to chain into our command normals, and from our command normals, we can cancel into our special moves, which are listed quite beautifully in the command list for whatever character you're playing. Okay, so moving on to kicks, things start to open up and get a little bit more interesting. From here, we can chain into our dust attacks while retaining the ability to go into our command normals. We can even jump cancel from our standing kick to open up left-right mix as well. The only downside to kicks is that you can't spam them into one another like punches to confirm you got the hit. You have to be pretty decisive once you press the kick button. Do you want to go into your dust? Do you want to go into a command normal? Do you want to go into a special move? Now, the slash button are where things get interesting for a lot of different reasons. First off, if we're close to our opponent when we press slash, we get access to close slash. Close slash is jump cancelable, typically plus on block, chains into crouch slash, chains into heavy slash, and chains into dust. It's basically the version of slash that opens up our entire kit. If you aren't quite close enough though, you get far slash, which still chains into heavy slash, so it isn't that bad on hit, right? Essentially, we've landed a medium into a heavy. We're still going to get pretty good returns in terms of damage, and even some characters can go far slash into crouch slash. Be sure to experiment. The slash button is very interesting on every character. Next up, we have heavy slashes. They're pretty straightforward. They're big, they're not the fastest, but they do hurt. Most of the time, they are special cancelable, so anytime we get access to these in a combo, we're going to be doing big damage. And lastly, we have Dust, a very straightforward but flexible tool depending on the situation. Let's start with its simplest version. The simplest version being Crouching Dust. That's going to be our universal sweep. It's a low that is special cancelable. Standing Dust, though, has 3 versions. If you simply press Dust while standing, you'll get a very quick overhead. Darn near unreactable. But if we hold it, we get a slower, more powerful overhead. That has some pretty rare properties mid-combo. Experiment, please. But if you hold up after you do this slower Dust, we get this little chase sequence here. Which, if it's your first time doing it, you'll probably think is like a stage transition. But it's a whole sequence where you get to do a bunch of damage. And it's universal, so don't fall asleep on anyone's mix when you're on defense. Even if Potemkin's on top of you, if you let him hit the standing overhead, you are in for a bad time. Finally, we have Jump Dust, which unlike the other aerials, doesn't always fit a particular function by design. Most characters' Jump Dust is actually their most unique button. Just look at the difference in nature between Soul's Jump Dust and Kai's Jump Dust. You're getting 2 entirely different things. So whatever character you're playing, please be sure to experiment with their Jump Dust. You're probably going to find a bunch of cool stuff. There's a lot of personality typically hidden behind these moves. So without getting into any particulars about character special moves, there's already a lot we have to look out for if we let our opponent get in on us. So let's take a look at some built-in defensive options as well. For starters, when you get knocked down in this game, you'll notice most of the time you flip out immediately. This is what we call a soft knockdown, and it happens by design. This will happen most of the time when you get knocked down, unless you get hit by a move that causes a hard knockdown. Specifically, most characters have access to the hard knockdown through their universal sweep, Crouch Dust. When this happens, most people will try to hit you as soon as you get up with a strike or a grab, right? You can avoid this entirely, though. Every character in the game can backdash, and backdashes have invincibility frames. This doesn't cost any meter at all and is a universal defensive tool. But if your opponent continues to pressure you as soon as you get up, if you manage to guard in time, you can hold any 2 buttons except Dust to activate Flawless Defense. This is going to increase the pushback, which each move that you block, effectively getting out of the pressure at the cost of some meter. This is going to be very effective to get you out of situations you don't really understand early on, so please be sure to use it. Over time, though, you will gain experience against certain moves to use Instant Block. And this is achieved by blocking just as a move connects. The timing is specifically 3 frames before a move actually connects to your guard. You will gain meter and reduce the pushback of your opponent's move on block instead, making moves that are typically safe because of pushback now unsafe. But alas, we are all human, and eventually we do get hit, and that's what the burst is for. It's a separate resource from our tension gauge that gives us a free get out of jail card if we're getting comboed. We just press Dust and any other button, and we're gonna get this nice explosion that just says, "Get the off of me." But with this great power comes great responsibility. It can be baited mid-combo, so be mindful when you do it. It can punish you very effectively, and you're just right back where you started, right? So just be careful. So, even though Guilty Gear characters have strong defensive tools that can be pretty oppressive in the right situation, we have a bunch of system mechanics that kind of dismantle a lot of our opponent's offense. At least until they get enough meter to start using Roman cancels. Roman cancels are the lifeblood of any Guilty Gear, especially in Strive, where we get access to 4, technically 5 unique kinds of Roman cancels that allow for some very emergent gameplay. On paper, we have red, blue, purple, and yellow Roman cancels, each costing half a bar and activating when the circle touches our opponent, creating like a slow down effect, right? All of these Roman cancels are performed when you press 3 buttons except Dust, and which one comes out depends on what your character is doing at the time. So if you're in the middle of an attack, either on hit or block, and you press Roman cancel, you'll get the red Roman cancel. This is going to cause a hitbox to come out that on hit acts as kind of a launcher, and on block adds a little bit more block stun. Purple Roman cancels are performed at the beginning of an attack during its startup, or during recovery frames. Typically you use this to kind of double down on neutral pressure or to start some kind of crazy setup you came up with. Blue Roman cancels come out when your character is completely free to move, either idle, dashing, or even after a move has recovered entirely. Depending on the situation, you can do some pretty creative stuff. Some people are using blue Roman cancels to create additional block stun once your move has entirely recovered but their opponent's still in block stun. Some people are using it to link together combos or moves that don't normally work together, right, with the slowdown effect. So like linking a heavy into a heavy. You can get pretty creative with this one. It may not seem like much at first, but it actually has the most potential of all 4 of the Roman cancels. Lastly, we have the yellow Roman cancel. which comes out when you are in block stun and acts as kind of a guard cancel when done successfully, turning a defensive situation into an offensive one, because it's plus if it actually hits successfully. But just like burst, it seems really strong, but it can be baited as well, so use it sparingly. But of course, to do any of these roaming cancels, you need at least half a bar, which raises the question, Kai, how do I gain meter? Going back to the design philosophy of Guilty Gear real quick, if you haven't already noticed, this game rewards actions taken when you're near your opponent. You get more options on offense from up close. They give you several system mechanics on defense, not just to block and defend yourself, but kind of start earning your turn back as these interactions are happening on defense. And your roaming cancel literally cannot complete activation unless you're within a certain radius of your opponent when you activate it. Following suit, meter is actually achieved by advancing towards your opponent and engaging with them on some level. And if you don't, this happens. The game will literally take your meter away. That means no roaming cancels, no flawless defense, and no supers. Guilty Gear is about interaction, and if you want meter, you have to go out and get it. And when you get meter, don't try to save it. Meter does not carry between rounds. So the idea here is to use it or lose it, and be absolutely relentless with it when the opportunity presents itself. Which brings us to wall breaks. Wall breaks are a pretty unique mechanic, not just to Stride, but fighting games in general, and are quite a weird addition, but on the surface level, here's all you need to understand. If your combo carries your opponent to the wall, it will most likely cause a wall splat. And from there, your next attack will cause a wall break. Same goes for stray hits and pressure that you do to your opponent in the corner. Over time, the wall's health will go down low enough to the point where your next hit will cause a wall splat, again leading to a wall break. The important thing to hear though is to note that post wall break, after this little animation, you get a positive bonus, which is going to give you free meter over time, which is a great asset to help you close out the round. This being entirely new, there's a lot we still don't know about it, but the second we get any definitive grasp of the mechanic, I'll be sure to break it down for you. The last mechanic I want to talk about, but probably the most important, is the counter hit system. You can get a counter hit in two ways: the traditional way, where you counterattack your opponent's whiff button before they can recover from it, or the Guilty Gear way, when you finally get a hit on someone whose wrist gauge is almost full from blocking too much for too long. In both instances, depending on the strength of your attack, you will see or hear counter, meaning you get a combo that you normally wouldn't be able to do. Heavies into heavies are open to availability, special moves into special moves are available in some instances. You really just open a Pandora's box of just combo opportunities. It's basically like a free roaming cancel. The more I think about it, the more I feel the potential here is absolutely insane, and I wanted to let you guys know to just be aware of it. They are quite literally, Arceus is quite literally yelling at us saying, hey, this is important. But with that, all this being said, you officially know everything you need to start to grow in Guilty Gear Strive. If you're worried about who's a good character, you're thinking of this a little bit from the wrong perspective. Remember, every character in Guilty Gear is different. Each path is different, and there's a bunch of ways to get to the top of the mountain, especially in Guilty Gear. So, and remember, each character is made to be accessible, so just pick whoever looks the coolest. That's the best advice that you're gonna hear, and it is good advice. If you want to know more about each character though, how their play style is inside the game, I'll do an overview video of all the characters in a video right after I drop this one, so be sure to sub if you haven't already. For those wanting a little bit more, I have a quick Q&A section coming up, so be sure to stick around and soak up that extra knowledge. If this was more than enough for you though, please feel free to come back and use the timestamps to navigate to certain parts of the guide that you need a refresher on. Alright, so I've thought of a few questions you guys are probably thinking, especially if you're coming from other fighters, that you definitely want to know to just up your game immediately. Let's get started. First question, can I be hit during the recovery frames of my run animation? Yes, but you can instantly stop by holding back and using faultless defense. This is called FD breaking. It's been in previous games, and it's probably why you've seen people just randomly shielding in neutral. Question 2, can I hit my opponent as they're landing from a jump? Yes, the window is tight, but if you pull it off, you'll see a punish indicator right under your health bar. Question 3, you mentioned 5 roaming cancels. Where's the 5th? If you press a button during the roaming cancel animation, you can instantly act instead of waiting for the full RC effect. These are called fast roaming cancels and have just as much potential as the rest, even though technically you're canceling the roaming cancel. Number 4, I've seen people dash during the Roman cancel. How do? Inputting the dash button left, right, up, or down right before canceling will let you do what we call Roman cancel drifting. This can be done with any Roman cancel except for yellow Roman cancels. Question 5. Why don't my combos do the same damage on everyone all the time? So, historically, in Guilty Gear, everyone will typically have the same amount of health. In Strive, it's 420. But everyone has different defense modifiers that increase the lower their health gets. We call this the gut system. Generally, due to guts, characters just take less damage when they have less health. Question 6. Can I burst offensively? Yes. This is called Gold Burst. If you get it to connect on hit, you get full meter. A great way to close out a round or mount a comeback. Alright, now that officially covers everything. If this guide helped you, please be sure to leave a like and share the video around. The last thing we need is people being banished to the salt mines a month into the game's lifespan. Lastly, guys, there is a mission mode that'll have everything that I said here and even more advanced tactics, so be sure to check that out as well. I had a great time putting this whole thing together, showing everyone through the front door. Let's get out there and rock and play some Guilty Gear.